Let's talk about engines. The most popular and reasonable choice is the inline-6. The pre-restyling X5 had the M57 engine. The cylinder block is cast iron. Only on X5/X6, this engine has a timing chain at the front and lasts up to 500,000 kilometers. This engine on the second generation X5 produces from 235 to 286 horsepower. The most powerful version is equipped with double supercharging, has its own piston group, crankshaft and fuel system. The M57 engine on the second generation X5 has lost all its shortcomings. The exhaust manifold does not burst, the swirl flaps do not disturb, and the intake manifold does not quickly become overgrown with plaque. The turbines are very reliable. The only thing is that on a Bitterboat engine there are problems with the vacuum hoses and actuators that drive the wastegate on the large turbine and the damper that cuts off the airflow to the small turbine. The pipes before and after the intercooler may burst, and leaks may also appear at their fittings. But these are all inexpensive little things. It is worth adding that sawed-off M57 engines can cause problems with oil pressure and its supply to the piston cooling oil nozzles. Overheated pistons instantly lead to scuffing and seizure. Serious wear of the main liners also occurs if the owner skimps on engine oil. BMW N57, BMW X5 N57D 211 horsepower, 245 horsepower. BMW X5 N57D top 306 horsepower. BMW X5 M50d N57S 381 horsepower. The N57 engine began production in 2008 and gradually replaced the old N57. The actual displacement of this engine is 3 liters. It has a light alloy cylinder block and the timing chains are located at the rear. It was on this engine that a version with 3 turbochargers appeared on the X5. This motor did not spoil the reputation of its predecessor at all. It is also a very reliable unit, but it is better to change the timing chains every 250,000 kilometers and listen to them after a mileage of 200,000 kilometers. With a normally functioning EGR system, the intake manifold of this engine quickly becomes coated with soot and oil. Therefore, every 100,000 kilometers you have to remove and clean the intake. However, on many copies the EGR system is sewn off, muffled and completely removed. The most powerful versions of these engines, with increasing oil change intervals and economy, then rotate the liners. But this only indicates inadequate service. The range of gasoline engines is a little more diverse and also differs on pre-styling and updated cars. At first, all gasoline engines of the second generation BMW X5 were naturally aspirated, N52B30. BMW X5 30i N52B30 260 horsepower, 272 horsepower. The 3.0-liter inline petrol 6 produces 272 horsepower, but is somehow rather weak for this crossover. This engine is hot, so you need to keep the radiators clean, and don't forget to change the expansion tank cap on a preventive basis. But the most important thing is to change the oil every 10,000 kilometers or more often. If there is plaque under the oil filler plug, and varnish deposits are already dark, almost red, then they did not like such an engine. You can expect oil consumption from it, and not only through the valve stem seals, but also through the piston rings. Vanos clutches will not tolerate dirty oil, although they can sometimes be revived by cleaning the control valve spools and check valves in the oil supply to them. If the owner is greedy and inattentive, hydraulic compensators will cause a similar problem. They will begin to click, and then the exhaust camshaft will wear out. The timing chain of this engine lasts about 200,000 kilometers. Replacement is expensive. The owner of a car with an N52 engine needs to be aware of the likelihood of destruction of the crankcase ventilation membrane and have about $800 in reserve to replace the electric pump. N62B48. BMW X5 48i N62B48 355 horsepower. The BMW X5 with a 4.8-liter naturally aspirated V8 N62 was produced before the restyling. The N62 is a good engine if you've looked after it. But the service is still extremely expensive. When buying a car with this engine, it is advisable to measure the compression in the cylinders and look into it with an endoscope. We have a detailed analysis of the N62 engine on our channel. You can find out all the details there. Let us add that N62 engines have a not very reliable starter, which completely suddenly and completely fails. N55B30. BMW X5 35i N55B30 306 horsepower. BMW X6 35i N54B30 306 horsepower. After restyling, a new petrol 6 N55 appeared under the hood of the BMW X5. 3 liters and turbocharging. Let us add that the N54 Bitterboat engine was installed on the X6 E71 from the very beginning. These are generally solid engines, but in the early years of production the direct injection fuel system caused many expensive problems. In principle, the X5 with this engine does not look scary and unkempt. You can trust this Turbo 6. You can see all the details about it in a separate review. N63B4450i, BMW X5 50i S63B44A 408 horsepower. After restyling, 5-liter Type BMW X5 appeared. What they actually got was a 4.4-liter twin-turbo petrol V8, badged N63. These wonderful engines died in batches when used in a metropolitan area with mileages of up to 100,000 kilometers. They couldn't survive idling in traffic jams, especially if the driver spent time at the races between idle times. There is good advice if you decide to buy a BMW with an N63 engine, buy a car with an already dead engine, overhaul it by installing new original spare parts. And don't let it dry out in city traffic jams. These engines died due to cylinder scuffing, so endoscopy is highly recommended. Worn timing chains broke and plain fluoroplastic guides, the shavings of which clogged the oil intakes. This led to rotation of the liners. BMW engineers spent a long time and painstakingly perfecting the fuel injectors so that they would become more reliable and would not lead to gasoline pouring onto the pistons and subsequent water hammer. Let's add here 2 turbochargers in the camber of the block and the catalyst close to them. This whole package creates a lot of heat. Therefore, the oil and seals of the BMW twin turbo 8 quickly become unusable. In general, the owner of a BMW with an N63 engine should know its weaknesses as well as the mechanic servicing this engine. But later versions, at least since 2011, have become better. S63B44A, BMW X5 M63B44A 555 horsepower. In the second generation of the X5, a full-fledged M version appeared. The 4.4-liter S63 engine is based on the N63, but the operating temperature has been reduced. In general, this engine has all the same weaknesses as the civilian N63. When operating and choosing the X5 E70, you need to monitor the condition of the engine compartment partitions. These plastic partitions on top rest against the hood and, as it were, isolate the compartment at the back. Over time, cracks appear in the plastic partitions, through which water from the outside then begins to drip directly onto the engine. Water flows quickly past the decorative cover and reaches the 4th and 5th nozzles. Sometimes it reaches others. Water can cause injector malfunctions. But the worst thing is that the injector bodies corrode and become tightly attached to the cylinder head. To avoid problems with injectors and pulling them out, replace cracked partitions in a timely manner. There are only 3 of them here, each costing $140. There are non-original parts, they are 3 times cheaper. An annoying and unpleasant breakdown in the second-generation BMW X5 is non-working windshield wipers. It happens that when you turn on the wipers, they jump a few centimeters and stop. This indicates that the plastic gear in the worm gearbox has worn out, all its teeth have been cut off. In this case, I had to buy a trapezoid gearbox, 61,617,200,510. Today this pleasure will cost $660. But you don't need to buy it, there are plenty of non-original gears on sale for $20 to $30. There are also proposals for non-original gearboxes assembled with a trapezoid motor, ZF6 HP 26/28 6-street automatic transmission, ZF8 HP 78 street automatic transmission. The second-generation BMW X5 was equipped with only ZF automatic transmissions. The 8-speed transmission for restyled cars is even more reliable and stronger, although it is 6-speed. It's hard to blame an automatic transmission for poor service life. Of course, a lot depends on both driving style and maintenance, but in general they are both capable of traveling at least 250,000 kilometers. The oil needs to be changed every 50,000 kilometers and keep an eye on plastic pans that can become deformed from heat. By the way, the oil changes along with the pan. Another oil leak occurs at the electrical connector bushing. By the way, we have a detailed review of the 6 HP 26 transmission on our channel. The second generation BMW X5 was equipped only with all-wheel drive. Pre-styling cars are equipped with an ATC 700 transfer case. This is a successful and strong distribution, unless the gears in the front axle connecting mechanism wear out. But they can be replaced with new non-original ones. After restyling, this transfer case was replaced with a more delicate ATC 450. It has a weaker lubrication system, so it wears out faster. Its clutches also last less. Twitching appears when turning and when the speed decreases. In principle, this transfer case is being successfully repaired. The oil in the transfer case needs to be changed every 50,000 kilometers. The restyled BMW X5 received a new drive shaft, which is sadly remembered for the destruction of the front crosspiece. If the crosspiece bursts, the cardan rotating at speed will break the automatic transmission housing and can even make a hole in the engine sump. During the recall campaign, the cardan shafts were changed. The latest revision number ends with 866. But similar problems arise with these cardan shafts. They have a very short spline at the front, which wears out and causes play. It is because of this play that the crosspieces experience increased loads. Some workshops re-equip the front crosspiece, install an elongated spline part. In general, you need to regularly check the front crosspiece for play and immediately change the cardan or strengthen its splines if there is play, and even more so if knocks and squeaks are heard while driving. At the rear, the transfer case rests on a single support cushion. Its damper breaks over time, but it is an inexpensive repair. The second generation BMW X5 still has a problem with gearbox wear. They have weak bearings and are threatened not only by inadequate sideways driving on asphalt and slipping, but also by low oil levels. Water can also get into the gearboxes through the breathers if the car gets into a deep puddle and spends some time there. Worn gearboxes hum, shaving chips into oil. The oil in the gearboxes also needs to be changed. The BMW X6 is equipped with an active rear gearbox. It uses two types of oil, simpler oil for hypoid gears and carbon oil for axle clutches. This elite grade of oil costs $100 per 0.5 liter. But you need 1.5 liters of it. There are no substitutes. The original oil for gearboxes and transfer cases is also not cheap, $100 per liter, but there are good substitutes for several times cheaper. BMW X5 CV joints are quite strong and last a long time, but due to their wear, vibrations can occur at very high speeds. Also keep an eye on the anthers because dirt and moisture will greatly reduce the life of CV joints. An electric parking brake unit is installed on the rear of the body. It contains electronic control and a servo drive that pulls the handbrake cables. This is a problematic node. It has gone through many revisions, 34,436,850,289. It fails completely unexpectedly. But as we have already noted, you can remove the X5 from the handbrake using a service key. After this, many owners disconnect the chip from this block. A new unit costs about $1,700. They have learned how to repair these units, and electric motors for its servo drive are on sale. Some non-original manufacturers even make their own copies of these blocks. The second generation BMW X5 could be equipped with active stabilizers, together with active shock absorbers. They are part of the adaptive drive system. Hydraulic lines are connected to each stabilizer, combined into one system with a steering rack and a power steering pump. All these additional lines and the stabilizers themselves eventually cause hydraulic leaks. The active stabilizer bars are mounted on rubber bushings through ball bearings. Over time, they simply fall apart, as evidenced by the knocking sound that appears. Bearing bushings, of course, are not sold separately, and in general they are firmly attached to the stabilizers. Therefore, you have to buy a used stabilizer and roll it until the next similar breakdown. Some people select rubber bushings or install a passive stabilizer. The second generation BMW X5 was equipped with both steel springs and air springs either at the rear or on all axles. There are also options with adaptive dampers and steel springs. The air suspension for cylinders and compressor is reliable and repairable. Today there is no need to be afraid of her. Adaptive shock absorbers are very expensive, $2,000 a piece. They are poorly repaired and have wiring and electrical problems in general. Cars with the adaptive drive system have a sport button near the automatic transmission selector. The BMW X5 suspension has become more reliable than that of the first generation car. Incredibly, the rather large BMW X5 is not often asked to replace suspension parts. There are two wishbones at the front. The design is reliable and durable. The first replacements of levers or silent blocks occurred after a mileage of more than 150,000 kilometers. It is better to install the original so as not to shake up the suspension every year. The upper control arms are sold as assembled units only, $260 each. Silent blocks and even ball joints are offered only from non-original manufacturers. The silent blocks of the lower arms can be purchased separately and repressed. The silent block of the rear straight arms, on which the shock absorber rests, serves the least purpose. It will cost $50, or you can buy a new lever for $140. Front oblique control arms cost $190, and their silent blocks cost $120. When inspecting the front spring suspension, be sure to pay attention to the lower coils. They often break off. No symptoms other than uneven tire wear appear. Original front springs cost $200, rear springs cost $250. At the rear, the BMW X5 has a familiar suspension with conventionally 3 levers. The lower arm is H-shaped with a small integral link. Separately, according to the original, for $120 you can buy only floating silent blocks. They connect the lower arms to the axle. Also, with high mileage, it is necessary to change the silent blocks of the H-shaped arms. There is no original separately. People buy substitutes for $30, $40 if they are not ready to pay $1,000 for the original levers. Stabilizer struts last a long time. Each original one costs $80. The BMW X5 is beautifully painted and well protected from corrosion. Rust on body parts is still a rarity and, most likely, indicates operation in regions that are very harsh in terms of reagents. Well, don't forget about body repair. You don't have to look for rust on the front fenders. They are plastic. The wings have a complex shape. They hug the headlights and serve as carriers for the fog lights. Over the years of use on the door moldings, i.e. on the vertical slats next to the glass, beetles still appear. They peek out from under the decorative coating and can lead to the breaking off of entire fragments of this coating. Vertical strips, they come in black glossy or matte, cost $140, $240. There are no non-original ones. Over time, the molding that frames the entire line of side windows on top becomes cloudy and loses its appearance. This molding can be either black or an aluminum design. It is easier to replace it with a new one or a used one in good condition. The headlight glasses on these cars very early began to become covered with a network of microcracks growing from their lower edge. Moreover, usually the number of cracks appeared not proportional to mileage or age. They say there was a large batch of headlights with defective headlights on pre-restyling cars. In some cases, cracks become so noticeable and deep that water enters the headlight housing through them. This whole problem can be treated by re-gluing the glass. As you understand, original new glasses are not widely sold. There are substitutes from China. By the way, in the BMW X5 E70 you can install the face from the X6 E71 without much effort or modifications. Headlights, fenders and bumper are interchangeable. The rear light sections, which are built into the trunk lid, literally burst at the seams and also quickly take on water during rain or car wash. Also, the seals underneath them quickly age. But this, as a rule, only applies to pre-restyling X5 second generation. Due to water and even dirt inside, the lights become cloudy and stop working. If a short circuit occurs in the lights, the light control unit will turn them off and record the corresponding error. The second generation BMW X5 does not suffer from breakdowns of door handle mechanisms like its predecessor. There are rare cases when the cable connected to the internal door release levers pops out. In cars equipped with keyless entry, this function sometimes disappears. You have to unlock the doors using the key fob and insert the key into the ignition slot. In this case, the battery may be discharged overnight because a short circuit appears in the faulty handle. For the same reason the fuse of this system blows, but replacing it will help for a short time. Due to a short circuit, a faulty handle will heat up and even melt. There are such cases. It is not the plastic of the handle that melts and leaks out, but the insulation in which its electrics are immersed. It is almost impossible to restore a keyless entry pan. You have to look for a used one, preferably in the same color as the car, or buy a new one. The interior of the second generation BMW X5 is well made, but its condition perfectly reflects both the actual mileage of these cars and the careful operation. In pre-restyling cars, the rubber around many keys, including the power window remote control, peels off. The inscriptions on the steering column levers and on the engine start button are erased. Decorative wooden strips on door panels lose their elegant appearance due to the appearance of cracks in the varnish layer. If the buttons on the steering wheel stop working, this means that the steering wheel cable needs to be replaced or resoldered. The rear view camera turns off and dies due to moisture seeping into its housing. The same thing can happen with cameras in the side mirrors. If the car is equipped with a panoramic sunroof, then close it and better never touch it. Its guides are very flimsy, and repairs with the installation of a repair kit will require a lot of labor with the removal of the sealing and all the hatch fittings. And yes, its drains definitely need to be cleaned. The electronics of the second generation BMW X5 are not buggy, but a dead battery can ruin everything. And yes, if you installed a new battery, be sure to register it. Voltage drops in the onboard network lead to the shutdown of the headlight control unit and some electronics in the cabin. The block is called from 3 and is located below in the front left pillar of the body. If the firmware has failed, then the BMW X5 will turn on the low beam and dimensions, but no other lights or lighting in the cabin will work. The power windows will also turn off. In this case, you will have to go to specialists and reflash the block. But during flashing and rebooting, it may turn out that the from 3 unit no longer shows any signs of life. It is weak flash memory that just dies. Used from 3 units are inexpensive, but they need to be replaced and flashed with the correct firmware by BMW specialists. The restyled BMW X5 is equipped with an electronic automatic transmission selector. Sometimes it has to be changed. Luckily, it doesn't stop working. It's just that at first, suspicious squeaks appear when moving, and then it does not automatically latch from the MS tilt to the left position to drive. By the way, in order to put the transmission into neutral for service tasks, you need a plastic T-shaped key, which is stored in the trunk underground. It needs to be inserted into the square slot, which is located under the left cup holder, and turned. The same key can be used to remove the BMW X5 from the handbrake. The parking brake is equipped with servos that are hopelessly dead. If the handbrake does not release the rear brakes, it can be unlocked with a service key. The connector for it is located on the right side of the trunk behind the upholstery. The BMW X5 E70, unlike the X6 E71, is equipped with a rear window washer. The pipe to the washer is laid under the floor covering. The tube has failed many, it cracks, after which the wash is poured into the sills by gravity and, naturally, floods the electrical wiring and some control units. If it bursts in the rear, an antifreeze agent will appear in the trunk underground around the battery. Because of the cheap tube, you have to lift the floor of the cabin and dry it. It is better, of course, to change it preventively. If you find that the washer level drops overnight, first turn off the supply from the reservoir to the rear windshield washer. In general, problems with the tube arise due to the freezing of cheap antifreeze in it. For the same reason, headlight washers stick in the extended position. Instead of a burst tube, a non-original silicone tube, any one about 6.5 meters long, will do. Craftsman also discovered that tubes from Toyota 2 pieces 90,099 to 33,589, fitting 85,349 to 89,122, and a check valve, 85,321 to 26,020, are ideally suited to them. The new tube can be laid along a short path along the right threshold. There is also water in the cabin, or rather first on the thresholds and then on top of the mats, due to the waterproofing of the doors peeling off. Usually it comes off after disassembling the door to repair it or add sound insulation. It comes off because it was poorly glued. If water appears in the niche behind the right trunk trim and wets the trunk lid control unit, then look for a gap in the right corrugation at the top of the trunk opening.